No? Yes? You heard it now, right? No, I think we've all heard that quote. There's a history to that quote. Would you like to hear the history? Because you came early. I mean, you came on time, not early. Would you like to be rewarded? Well, when Prabhupada was ill, and he came back to Vrindavan, and he was preparing pretty much that this would be the end, then he wanted devotees to come be with him, as many as possible. So he was asking the leaders to ask the devotees. So he's asking, will they come? And one of the leaders said, I'm sure they come. I'm sure they will come because they love you. And that's when Prabhupada made that statement. He said, your love for me will be shown by how you cooperate to keep, how you cooperate together, or how you cooperate or work together to keep this movement together. That's where that quote came from. So the devotee was saying, we love you, and Prabhupada saying, this is how you'll show the love. In other words, a deeper meaning to love than just, well, they'll come because they love you. Isn't that nice? And I think that is extremely significant. Don't you think? That Prabhupada's defining love for him as, in a sense, you could say he's defining love as being able to tolerate the difficulties we have in dealing with people and situations. Often, when things are not the way we would like them to be, or the way we feel they should be, we become discouraged. And we sometimes feel a loss of enthusiasm to work within a situation that doesn't live up to what we would expect, either in the way we're doing something, or the outcome, or the way individuals are behaving. And so sometimes we feel like, oh, it would just be so much easier not to work with this, because this is not something that I agree with, it's not the way I would do it. It's very easy to just, isn't it? But to stay and work through it and try to tolerate it and be patient, like we were discussing last night, where you're better at something, but a person who's not as qualified is given that service, or even appointed to be in charge of you. That's difficult. Or something goes wrong and you predicted it, and then you told you so. You know, it's hard not to say that, isn't it? So if we define cooperation as love, then I think it'll be a little easier, when we don't feel like cooperating. And then we can ask ourselves, well, now I'm being challenged. My love for Prabhupada is being challenged right now because I don't agree with this situation, or I don't feel I was treated properly, or this devotee was treated properly. I'm not inspired by how things are going. Sometimes we feel even embarrassed by what goes on, and that we represent a movement that sometimes may do or say something we don't agree with. That's hard, isn't it? Have you ever been in a class and something was said that you wouldn't have said, and you could see there were negative reactions? That's difficult, isn't it? Somebody is kind of upset about something, and you feel maybe it wasn't presented properly, and you're thinking, I don't want to be part of an organization that does this, but Prabhupada's asking us to be part of it. Right? So, if we define cooperation is love, then I think we get some insight into what Prabhupada meant by love. I think another aspect of this is that when Prabhupada looks at devotion, he doesn't look at it in terms of what you like or don't like, or what's comfortable or not comfortable, or what makes you feel good or doesn't make you feel good, or what's convenient or not convenient. He looks at it in terms of what is pleasing to Krishna and what isn't. So if something is pleasing to Krishna and not pleasing to you, and you don't want to do it because it's not pleasing to you, from Prabhupada's perspective, that's not devotion. But devotion is, well, will this please Krishna? So in relating to the topic, if it'll please Krishna, that's what's important, right? I don't want to do this, I don't agree with it, but will it please Krishna? And if it'll please Krishna, then I should be inspired. Now, I'm going to throw your vision around a little bit to maybe help you become inspired by problems, or become inspired by things that you don't like. I once heard you could say a business guru or a money guru make a statement that wherever you see a problem and you have a solution, there's a business. Like, do you ever get a package you can't open? And you think, why don't they make a package you can open? Why do they make a package you have to cut with scissors? This is so difficult. Or why is it so hard to tear? Or why this or why that? Well, that's how businesses start, because somebody thought this is an inferior, product. When I was young, stamps, you had to lick them or put them on water. So at one point somebody thought, why do we have to lick them? Why can't we make a stamp that just sticks, right? Only took them like 150 years to figure that out, right? But that was a problem. Someone came up with a solution. That was a company. The Post-it guy, the little Post-its, they're kind of handy. Of course, now you have digital Post-its, so that has kind of decreased the Post-it business. But, I grew up without Post-its. Could you imagine growing up without Post-its? How could you live? I grew up without Post-its. And somebody came up with the idea, what's a Post-it? It's a little piece of paper with a little adhesive on the top that you put on your wall or put to remind you. Perfect, I know they have Post-its on your computer, yeah. So it was a problem. He could see, I have little pieces of paper, but I need to stick them somewhere. So he solved a problem, and that created a business, right? So that's a business model. So now how do we take that into the Krishna conscious viewpoint? Wherever there's a problem that you see, there's a service. And why do I say that? Because you know that a lot of problems you see, other people don't see them. Only you see it. You ever had that experience? Or maybe other people see it, it doesn't bother them, or they don't think it's as bad as you think it is. And you see this problem, and this is kind of driving you crazy. Why are we doing this? Why does the line go this way? It should go this way. Why are we serving this way? We should serve this way. This doesn't work. Why this? Why that? And to you it's like obvious, it should just be this way, isn't it? Sometimes this is so obvious. Why are they doing it this way? Then you suggest the idea and someone says, oh my God, that's such a good idea. And you're thinking, that's not a good idea. That's like, why didn't you think of that? That's just obvious. But sometimes Krishna gives us a vision to see something that somehow nobody else is seeing. Or to be upset about something that nobody else is upset about. So when that happens, one thing you could think is, Krishna's given me a service because I see it and it bothers me. And if I can solve it, it'll stop bothering me. Isn't that interesting? So you have two reactions to a problem. You can complain till the grave, or you could actually do something, create a service that would solve this problem. So that's another way to look at problems and not get discouraged. And I think one of the ways Maya works for us is you see a problem, you complain about it. So first you complain about the problem, then you upgrade your complaint to complain about the management, because the problem exists because of the management, right? So here's a problem. You notice the problem, complain about it. And then complain about the people in charge because they are allowing this problem to go on. So it escalates. Have you ever seen that? You always connect it. Well, and then you can connect it all the way up to GBC. Why would a GBC allow a temple president who doesn't have the eyes to see how things should be going? You can just take it all the way up. If you want to take it up to Krishna, you can go that far also. So that's the dangerous side of seeing a problem. And that happens all the time. Doesn't it? One level to the next. Just put it together. Sometimes problems are created because we don't have competent people. Not because there's anything wrong with that person. He's a nice guy, he's sincere, or a nice lady. She's sincere, she's trying, he's trying, but they're not that competent. And they should be doing something else, but there's no one else to do what they're doing, so they do it. So, what do? There's a problem. We see there's some lack of competency. I see the problem, I have competency. Why don't I do something? A lot of people prefer to complain than do something. There's a hole in the wall. Johnny Tai, it would be okay if I fixed the hole in the wall. I know how to do this. I used to repair holes in walls. This is what we need. It'll cost 20 pounds. I can do it. Sure, go do it. What's the other option? Johnny Tai, you have a hole in the wall. Get it together. Take care of this building. What's wrong with it? Isn't it? Yeah. So we need more of that vision where you can see a problem and then translate it into some kind of positive action. If it's not you, then present it. At least you can present it. Maybe you have a solution. Say, this is, I think, a solution. I don't have the time to do it, but it's a suggestion. So you're not complaining. Everything's positive. And so in some cases, whole departments will develop because there's a problem. How many of you are familiar with the Devotee Care Initiative? Okay. That Devotee Care Initiative came from a realization that we're not taking care of devotees, a problem. Right? And somebody decided that the solution to this problem is to form a group in the temple, you can call it a department, that looks after the needs, that starts to become more aware of the needs of devotees and takes care of them. That was the solution. So that's an example of what I'm talking about. You see a problem, you form a solution, it might be a department. Anyway, just meditate on this idea. If you are noticing a problem and you notice it more than others, it bothers you, you keep seeing it, maybe that's a sign from Krishna that you're the one who's supposed to solve it. Yes?
Can it be a sign that you're just too sensitive? Because for some others...
It's not a problem.
It's not a problem.
Yeah, okay, that's a good question. Let me answer that after I finish this point. All right? Let's take the first point. Let's assume it is a problem and you have a solution, or at least you can think, okay, well, we'll take your question also. I see a problem. Mahatma said, if I see a problem, it could be a sign from Krishna that I'm the one who's meant to do something about it. And so you think along those lines. That's, and you present that. Now, if you present that to the temple president, he might say, that's not a problem. We don't mind. Okay, it's not a problem. I'm just seeing it as a problem. It's not a big deal. Or you might say, wow, that's great. I've been thinking for years how to deal with this, and you've come along. Please do that. So then it is a problem. And if he says we're not interested, it might be just not a priority and he needs you to do something else. Further, when you're looking at something, you can always ask yourself, is this a problem or am I just fault finding? Try to be introspective and detached enough. Because if you're a little detached, then you can kind of discriminate between if it's a real problem or it's just your fault finding. You have to be honest enough with yourself to admit, if you are fault finding, that you might be. Yes?
And what if one is actually capable to take some responsibilities, but he withdraws and tries to protect himself? Because I met some devotees who were actually able to do certain services, but they said, sorry, it's too stressful, I don't know.
Okay.
Is it the ignorance or the...
It may not be ignorance, it may be practicality, because they know that they won't be successful with that service, and they won't be able to handle the responsibility, and they may not do it well, or they may stress other people out, so it's better they don't. In other words, it's valuable to know what you can do well, and it's just as valuable to know what you can't do well. Because sometimes the greatest service you can do for Krishna is not to do a service that you don't do well. Because sometimes the greatest service you can do is to not do a service that you don't do well. In other words, the greatest service you can do is to recognize that you're not good at something and don't do it, because by engaging in it, you'll create problems for yourself and others. I have seen practically, there are some devotees, they're very nice devotees, they're very capable, but then they get elevated to positions for which they're not so capable, and everybody doesn't, at that point, nobody likes them. They're messing things up, they're not treating devotees well. They're not good in that position. So for them to have the transparency to understand that that's not good for them is wise, and then they refuse. They say, no, if I do that, it will be mismanaged, or I will burn out, and in the middle of the project, you're going to have to find somebody else, because I know from experience that I'm not good at these things. So I think that's okay, because it's in Krishna's interest. Now, in a situation where they say, your president might say, it's okay, just do it. If you burn out, then you burn out, but right now we need you. So that might be an exception, but in the long run, we want you to manage the restaurant, and it goes bankrupt after 3 months. And you already bankrupt 2 restaurants before, so you probably would say, I don't think I should do this. I'm not good at managing money in restaurants. So we'll be fortunate for us if you don't manage it. Does that make sense? Like I give a class on following your dharma, finding your dharma, what you should do. But just as important in finding it is to know what you shouldn't do. Okay. So this is, it's just a meditation for all of you. If you see a problem, think perhaps Krishna, there's a service here that Krishna wants me to do. Like, we're all sitting here. Is there a problem with us sitting here? Someone in this room sees a problem. What's the problem? There's only 12 of us. There's only certain kinds of people. There's no, the mayor of London's not here. The head of Abbey Road Studios, you're not, but somebody is seeing that as a problem. And because he's seeing that as a problem, he thinks, I've got a service here. And nobody else sees that, but he sees it. That means Krishna's giving you a vision that there's a problem that nobody sees because there's a service there. Does that make sense? And why did Krishna give you that vision? Everything's fine, we're having a good time here. No. What's being talked about here, we should have had 20 executives from the 20 biggest companies in London hearing this, because they need to hear this. There's a problem, It's not just for a devotee, So somebody's thinking like that. So thinking, we have a big problem here. That the head of Google, Intel, Cisco, they're not here tonight. That's a huge problem. And I'm going to figure out how to get them next time. I've got a service. That's my service. Because if you see it, that means Krishna's giving you an idea for a service. Does that make sense? And I don't think that's fault finding. I think that's inspiration. You might say, what a fault finder. This was a great class, and he's finding fault that, the head of Google wasn't here. No, he's inspired. He was inspired by it, and he feels that if the head of Google came here, he would become closer to our movement. He would invite us to speak at his place. So I want to get him to come here next time. That's inspiration. That comes from seeing a problem. You understand what I'm saying? So the danger is you see the problem and you just, look at this, they don't have any, this temple's been here since 1973 and we have no important people are coming, and how many people British are here, just a handful, and you can complain till you die, or you could look at that and that becomes your inspiration to bring those people. You see what I'm saying? The very thing you're complaining about could be positive. The people that aren't here becomes the inspiration to get them here. The thing that's not happening becomes inspiration to make happen. Or it becomes inspiration to complain about why it's not happening and who's not making it happen. Because typically, we should do this, we should do that, then you just go to sleep. But if you don't do it, well, who's going to do it? And then 10 years later, someone does that. And you say, 10 years ago I said we should do that, and you're all proud of yourself. But you didn't do it, so why be so proud? Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's really an important philosophy. In the world of self-development, and also in the world of business, they teach 5%, 95%. 5% focus on the problem, 95% the solution. Because you just have to focus on the problem long enough to understand it. And then the rest, the solution, because the solution is positive. The problem is negative. What do most people do? At least 95% on the problem. Sometimes 0% on the solution. Have you ever heard the statement, whatever you are against will drain you, whatever you are for will inspire you? Have you heard that before? Whatever you are against drains your energy. Whatever you are for inspires you. So here's the problem. You see it, you turn it around. This is what I'm for. I'm for bringing important people from London to this temple. That's what I'm for. But if I focus on the problem, then I get drained. Nobody important's coming here. Been here almost 50 years. What's going on? We need some good leadership. This movement's useless. It's hopeless. I'm going to start my own movement. Does that make sense? Yeah, so 5% the problem, 95% solution. And you'll be inspired. And if you focus 90% problem, you'll be very discouraged, frustrated, angry, and you likely will be very critical of management, but you won't do anything. One time, a devotee was complaining about the behavior of another devotee, and Prabhupada said, don't complain, but however you want that devotee to be, just be that way yourself. And that will be the best. That's the way you can inspire change or help the situation. Just be what you want others to be. Of course, that's the most difficult. It's easier just to find fault, because it requires no skills or training. Well, the only training it requires is being in the material world for millions of lifetimes. You get really good at it, because every lifetime we do it. And so by now, we're like really good at it. We can do it in our sleep, right? We can criticize in our sleep. We don't, we're sarcastic, we're funny, we're cutting. Isn't it? So that's easy. Yes. Set the example of how you want the other person to be that way yourself. We don't do that enough because that's difficult. Prabhupada, it should be this way. Are you willing to do that? Not always. So you could kind of see how things can become, how friction can develop amongst devotees because we're not willing to be solution based and we're pointing our fingers. You agree? Yeah. And it's important to understand that we need to elevate our what's the word? Protocol, you could say. The way we deal with problems, we need to elevate it to a sattvic level so that we deal with it in the right way. So it creates more unity. Like I was saying yesterday, if there's a problem, like Priya and I were talking earlier, like there's a problem, and I was giving some solutions, and she was saying, but I'm afraid that those solutions would cause the people in charge to become upset or upset with me. So it's always good to ask ourselves, is the solution going to be unifying and uplifting and enthusing? Because, from my experience, the most important ingredient in a team or a temple or a community is inspiration. And once that's removed, we're pretty much useless for really doing anything great if there's no inspiration. We can do something, but inspiration is behind doing great things. And I know many of you, when you read the biographies of Prabhupada, and you weren't there, you might wonder, how was it that 20-year-olds spread this movement and now 60-year-olds can't do what the 20-year-olds 1 year in the movement did? And the answer is inspiration. It wasn't intelligence or ability or experience, because we didn't have much of any of those. We had a lot of inspiration. Now they did a study. Well, I can't say we didn't have intelligence, because in the study they did, they found out where inspiration and teamwork is high, intelligence will be given to the team even greater, will be given to a team who's less capable than a more capable team who's more intelligent, who's not inspired. That less capable team will make better decisions than the more capable team who's not inspired. That Krishna will channel that intelligence. So that's what was happening to us. I was temple president. I was 19 years old. Come on. I didn't have MBA. I dropped out of university at 19. I didn't study management. I didn't like managing. I was music. Philosophy, music, that's what I liked. We were extremely inspired, and that inspiration, it attracted people. And Krishna gave us intelligence. So, if you're working within a group, and in the name of making things better, you destroy inspiration and enthusiasm, you've basically destroyed the group, even if you have good ideas. Have you had, any of you have experience of that? Inspiration is essential. There's a name for people in America who are extremely intelligent, who do not well represent the brand of a company. So they get a job, they're really qualified, they do really well, but when they're dealing with the other workers or dealing with the public, they don't represent the way the company expects and wants them to deal with people. So they go out and sell something, but they don't do it in a way that represents the brand of the company, or they don't deal with the workers that represents the values of the company. They have a name for them. They call them brilliant jerks, and they all get fired, at least by the cutting-edge companies who want to create a culture and sustain a culture that these people can't sustain. These people actually undermine, and they fire them. Did you know? You ever heard of that term? Brilliant jerks. Because they don't work within the culture of the company, so they fire them. So they've realized that they need people who represent the culture, and even if they have qualified people who don't represent the culture, those people are what's the word? I just ate a lot of Shrikant, so my mind is like, it's rebooting right now. A liability, that's the word. They realize those people are actually a liability. They actually cost the company money, even though they're more qualified than most of the other employees. Isn't that interesting? Because they cause a disunity in the culture. They don't live the culture. Maybe they lack honesty, integrity, or whatever it is that the culture is trying to imbibe within the company. And they fire all those people. Isn't that interesting? And the companies that are a little ahead of the game, who understand this, they are not so concerned about the skills as about the attitudes of the people. And they hire that. Does this person fit in our culture? If they do, we'll hire them. This devotee I was talking with today, he just got hired for a company, and he demanded £10,000 a year more than they paid him, and they said, okay. They said, we really want you. And he said, what you want me to do, some of these skills I don't have. They said, it's okay, we'll train you. They liked him so much, his vibe was the vibe they wanted, and they're willing to pay him more and pay to train him. So that's a smart company, because he fits in the culture. So I think it's extremely important when we're dealing with a group and we're coming up with plans and solutions, the plans and solutions and or the way we go about it creates unity, harmony, and inspiration. Because if it doesn't, in the long run, do I have your permission to close that window? You think it's bad, but some people live here and they have to hear that all night. I know, I lived here in 1983 for 3 months, so I know what it's like. If you're a very practical person, you may tend to focus on results and not focus on these other things. But in the long run, it'll undermine you if you don't create that, if you don't maintain inspiration and unity. And that's what Prabhupada did, and that's why we were successful. In my estimation, inspiration was the main thing. And when you take that away, you don't have much left. And in the letter, Prabhupada was talking about enthusiasm, and he said, if we don't have enthusiasm, then basically everything will be finished. You agree? So I think that's really important when we talk about cooperation. Let's say, for example, you disagreed with a group, and you realized that if I fight it, it's going to destroy the morale of the group, so I'm not going to fight it, because I can see they're unified on it. So I'll support it because it creates unity. Because you understand unity and inspiration is the highest thing. And then once we have that, then maybe my idea can be worked through eventually. And then you might say, but what if their idea was wrong? Say, if it's wrong, they'll understand it, but at least they're still together. Do you want to hear a great story? This story is amazing. You want to hear a great story? Yeah, okay. Here's a great story. Have you ever heard of businesses or organizations or teams creating a code of honor? How many of you have heard of that? Code of honor. Well, code of honor is an agreement that they come to about how they want to interact with one another. And the code of honor could be anything. So let's say all of you are in a department, and we sit down and we say, how do we want to work in this department? And we come up with ideas. And we all agree, we debate them, we discuss them, and then we agree on the ideas. Okay, this is how we'll work. If we have a problem, we'll approach the person directly. If someone on the team needs help, we can't refuse, we'll always help them. If We'll always be on time for meetings. You just make like rules like this. So they made a rule in this company that no decision can be made unless everyone in the company agrees upon it or a majority agrees upon it. And they made another decision that if someone in the company needs your help, you can't refuse. But they all agreed. They came up with it. You might say, well, that's pretty heavy. But they came up with it. So because they came up with it, then naturally they agreed to do it, right? That's what's so nice about the code, is they came up with it. So it's a trucking company, and they do 2 shifts. They have the day and the evening. So the evening shift, I think it's maybe like 8 in the evening to 4 in the morning, and they get a shipment out at like 4 o'clock or something, or 3 o'clock. But one night they had more shipments than they could handle. So at midnight they called the day shift people and said, we need your help. And because that was their code, all the day shift people came out, and every single one came because they agreed to that. Isn't that amazing? And something more amazing happened. The second one, that no one can make a decision independently. It has to be agreed upon by the group or the majority. So the company was having trouble. It was actually going bankrupt. So one day the owner of the company called all the people in, and he said, I'm sorry to tell you, but our company's going bankrupt and we're going to close it. And they said, you can't close the company. And he said, what do you mean I can't close? It's my company. He said, we have an agreement. You cannot make a decision that we don't agree with. And they wouldn't agree to close the company. And his hands were tied. And you know what they did? About half the people in the company couldn't work there because they couldn't afford it. So this small group of people kept the company open, and they worked both shifts. And they saved the company. So because of that agreement, the company was saved. So what I took away from that is, if you stick together, even if you crash together, Whereas if, I stick to the right thing and we fight and you leave, and my thing maybe was right, but I just lost half the people, and now I don't have that inspiration and unity, and you're all alienated, and now you're complaining, and and also your devotional life is affected because you've been alienated. So it's a thought that maybe I don't agree with you, but I'll be willing to go with you because it'll create unity. And I know if at some point we realize that my idea was better, we'll be together. And everyone will know, and we can work through it. At least we're still together. So it seems, from what Prabhupada has taught us, that keeping that unity is of utmost importance. And you're probably familiar with the letter Unity and Diversity, and it's not that we're all the same, but we're able to work through, we're able to work together even though we're different. And we value the differences. They're necessary, and we appreciate them, and we combine them. Have you ever heard the formula that if you compromise, then you get 1 + 1 equals 1, because you each get a half. Anyone heard this formula? Compromise is 1 + 1 equals half. If you cooperate, 1 + 1 equals 2, and you synergize, 1 + 1 equals 11. And the idea of synergy was, you have an idea, I don't agree with it. I have an idea, you don't agree with it. Or you agree with a little bit, I agree with yours a little bit. And when we synergize, come up with a third idea that's way better than my idea and your idea. Hare Krishna. Should I say that formula again? Compromise, 1 + 1 equals 1, because it's half-half. Cooperate, 1 + 1 equals 2. When we put our ideas together, we came up 2. Synergize, 1 + 1 equals 11, because we came up with a third idea. It was better than the first 2. So I may not like your idea, but I listen to it. You may not like my idea. You listen to it, and then we work together. We come up with a third idea that's even better. So that way, diversity is good because it presents different ideas. So it's a nice way to think. Okay, I don't like your idea, but I'm going to listen to it. And then often, have you ever been in a situation where you don't like someone's idea, but you think about it and you actually come up with a better idea, better than yours, because you add theirs into it? Anyone have that experience? Yeah. How many of you have heard the statement in which Prabhupada said that this movement cannot be stopped from outside, it can only be stopped from inside? How many have heard that? Yeah. So that's a pretty powerful statement also. There's no one out there that will stop this movement. It'll only happen from within. Someone will tear it apart, some will create factions, someone will turn devotees against one another. Now, I want to tell you something very heavy. And I'm not pointing the fingers at anyone, but but Prabhupada did say it. He said, there are people dressed as Vaishnavas who are in this movement, and their goal is to destroy it. So that's a very heavy statement. Prabhupada. So I'm not saying this so you can try to figure out who they are and chop their heads off, but just to emphasize the statement that if it's going to be destroyed, he didn't say there are demons out there on the caliber of Kamsa who are trying to destroy the movement. He said they're inside. I can't say if they're inside today, 2017, where they are, but the fact that he said it, it just underscores his point that it's not going to happen from outside, it's going to happen from the inside. And I think that underscores the need for unity and cooperation. And in the long run, I think you must have all experienced that when you work on a team that works well together, it's very inspiring, and you work on a team that doesn't work well together, it's extremely frustrating, discouraging, it even can make you angry. You have that experience? Can I tell a story? We, in 1992, I think, I was in Mauritius, and we created a team to put on like a 4-day Janmashtami, or all week. I think it was like 4 or 5. Janmashtami and Vyas Puja. And so, I think before that we were getting 500,000 people, and then I think we got 4,000 or 7,000, something, which for you here is not big, but there's only 1 million people in the whole country. So if you do the math, you maybe have 60 times more people here, so us 1,000 is like 60,000 for you. So it was a big thing for us. So we formed a committee, and the committee was all professionals, like big people in the country, and they all took responsibility for different parts of the festival. And the festival was more successful than we had anticipated. And right after the festival, they were so excited, they said, let's start organizing the next festival. So that's what happens when you work together and you're successful. You feel inspired. Anyone have that experience? It's like, yeah. Okay, we just did this. What's the next thing? Let's do it bigger. We did this, 1,000 people came. Can we get 10,000? Maybe we need to rent a stadium instead of a hall. So when people work together, as we said yesterday, when people are sensitive, respectful of one another, when they create this synergy, it creates excitement and inspiration. And that's the foundation of success. And that's why it's such a problem when we don't cooperate. And that's why yesterday I focused on us as the ones who have to cooperate. Because the only person who can make it better is you. Yes? I just wrote a book. It's coming out soon. It's called Uplift Yourself, Change the World. And the theme of that book is you are the only one who can make the world better. So you are the only one who can make Iskcon better. You are the only one who can make the temple better. You are the only one who can make your team better. That's how we think. Not in a proud way, but in the way that my contribution is what I have control of. So, that was my introductory speech. And I wanted to take off where we left yesterday. Because yesterday we left off with questions and your realizations. And I think many of your realizations were quite personal about your own nature. And I think it would be helpful for you to share your realizations, because my experience in doing workshops is that most of the realizations you have are pretty universal, that most people will relate to it. And it would be nice to discuss. So if you can kind of go into the mood you were last night after the exercise, kind of get back and remember what you were discovering, and volunteer to share and or ask a question. We can start from this point. Any question is fine. Yes?
So, Prabhu, yesterday you were talking about how Gaudiya at one point was separated in many groups.
Gaudiya Math separated, yeah.
So now Iskcon is one, but my experience, I've seen a few temples, so everywhere you go there is devotees, but they're diverse in a sense. There is even philosophically sometimes there's differences.
Between temples?
Between devotees.
Oh, devotees.
Devotees.
Okay, yeah.
Even within one temple, there's different groups.
Yeah, okay, yes.
Big temples.
Yeah.
So sometimes it might.
Where are you from?
Italy.
Oh, okay. You're talking about Italy, or you're talking about other places?
Well, I was studying Vrindavan for some time.
Okay.
And America also.
Okay.
So.
What to do? How to deal with it?
So sometimes it might be hard to cooperate with people who are not as like-minded.
Yeah.
For them and for you.
Yeah. Okay, that's a very good question. I want to rephrase the question or make it more specific and ask: is it wrong or bad not to cooperate with someone who's not like you? Is that okay? We can ask that question also.
It's bad.
Is it bad? Is it wrong? Is it wrong not to cooperate with someone who thinks differently than I do? Or is it wrong not to cooperate with someone that I find it difficult to see eye to eye on things? Is that kind of the question? Or how to deal with it?
Well, sometimes there might not be. Like I've seen some people recently. Okay, there was some difference in the philosophical.
Uh-huh.
So they just got kicked out the whole ashram.
Oh, okay.
So
That's a very specific question then. And a very specific, whether they were Ritvik or something, or representing another
just
philosophy or another movement?
just
Or
different moves.
yeah, okay. It's hard for me to say because that's a very specific. Let me start general. Maybe we can get more specific. Sometimes Prabhupada saw that two people couldn't get along, and he said, "You go here, you go here, you go here with four men." He saw that they needed to have their own space. So sometimes he made logistical adjustments because he saw the natures of some people were such that they both needed to be in charge of something. So that's an example of two people who don't work well together or have different natures. And the way they cooperate is by going to two different places or two different apartments. Rather than fighting, okay, you take this and you take that. So that's a form of cooperation. When it's philosophical, it's a little more serious. Because I asked, I think it was Harisari or Shrutikirti, I said, what was Prabhupada's greatest concern in terms of deviation? He said philosophical was his greatest concern. Or I don't know if I asked what kind of deviation. I said, what was his greatest concern or greatest worry? And he said philosophical deviation. So that's a different issue. I don't know if it relates exactly to what we're saying. But there's one way we could address it, and I don't know if it would have solved your situation. But let's say you and I disagree about something. And it's creating a problem within the temple, or it's creating a problem for us. So one question we can ask is, how can we work together in spite of this disagreement? How can we coexist peacefully? And one of the answers may be, why don't you go start a preaching center, and you can, in your center, you can teach this, but here we don't teach this. That could be a possibility. And I'm not saying, because I don't know your situation, I'm not saying that's the solution. But sometimes the solution is, okay, we see we don't work together, we have a difference, and we can't resolve it. So how can we still work together? What could we do where that doesn't become a problem? It's the question you're asking, right? Because if you ask the right question, then you can come with a solution. But you have to ask the right question. The wrong question is, what's wrong with you? Or why are you crazy? Or how could you be so stupid to believe this? So if you ask that question, obviously it's not going to unify anything. And I'm not saying how we can work together would work in every situation, but sometimes it does. How can we coexist in this environment with these differences? Possible solution. Would that work in that solution or no, in that situation?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a consideration. But in other words, you have 2 points of view, and it's obvious they're not going to agree. So then the question is, how can we coexist? Because first you want to kind of see if we can come up with a compromise to agree. But if we can't, how can we coexist? That's the next step. And this is not just like, well, I think we should do Rath Yatra on this date and you think on another date. Well, so you can compromise. This is philosophical, which you feel is kind of at the root of something which is essentially important, and you don't want to compromise that, which is understandable. Okay, you don't want to compromise it, so how do we coexist? Now, some of you know that there are devotees who believe that Prabhupada didn't appoint any gurus, and that anyone who takes disciples is basically of the devil. You know about that? And they believe that people should only initiate on behalf of Prabhupada. And some of those who propagate that philosophy have been extremely critical of gurus in Iskcon, to the point of not just critical, but kind of childish blasphemy, like painting horns on the heads of gurus and pasting it on the internet, which is, it's kind of immature, right? But there are people who adhere to that philosophy who are quite respectful. And they're gentlemanly, and they're following Vaishnava etiquette. It's just that this is what they believe Prabhupada wanted. And they're not doing it in an offensive way. And I don't appreciate that philosophy, but I did appreciate those people who could stick to their views, which are not the views within Iskcon, but be respectful of the people in Iskcon. And some of them would say, I don't agree with the philosophy, I think it would be better if we did it the other way, but if these gurus initiate, that's between them and their disciples. It's just respectful. So I think that's important, because what I've seen is that when people think they're right, sometimes they think they have the right to be belligerent, blasphemous, and ungentlemanly in promoting their idea, because they're right and the other side is wrong. And they think that legitimizes that kind of behavior. And that's a mistake. You agree? Yes.
Excuse me, Rabbi, it's regarding this topic.
Okay.
So what is the destiny of such a person who acts on this platform?
In his next life, he won't find a guru. In his next life, he'll get a Ritvik guru. We can't say, because it's not that those persons are not serving Prabhupada and not pleasing him. But anyone who criticizes a devotee or blasphemes a devotee has a big weed in their heart. And obviously, they're not pleasing Krishna by doing that. But ultimately, we're not the ones to judge. We can only speak on the basis of Shastra, that if you blaspheme a devotee, it's an offense to the holy name, and that's going to hold back your devotional service, and in some cases it's the mad elephant offense, it can destroy your devotional service.
So are they still connected to the parampara? In terms of spiritual
Yeah,
advancement,
they're connected, but the connection may not be a healthy connection. Or it's an interesting topic, because some people are good devotees and very critical at the same time, which seems to be a paradox, doesn't it? But if you're very critical and you're a good devotee, that is a paradox in the sense because criticism is a manifestation of a weed. And the people who are critical will say, I don't have a weed, I'm just telling you how things are. That's okay, but how are you telling us, and how are you dealing with the devotees? Are you respectful of the devotees? And if you're critical of devotees in an un-Vaishnav way, that's a symptom of a weed, at least in my estimation. So it's a bit of an elephant bath.
possible to help such people?
It usually has to come from within. One thing that helps such people is Iskcon becomes purified, and they see sadhus in the movement, and it changes their hearts. And they realize there are genuine gurus, there are genuine devotees. But generally they don't change. And a lot of people who need reasons to turn against Iskcon, they align with those people. There is a devotee, he used to be a guru in Iskcon, and he said, whatever way Iskcon goes, I will go against it. So if he became a Ritvik, and he said, and if Iskcon becomes a Ritvik, I'll give up Ritvik, and I'll promote Diksha Gurus. So I think some people, he was honest enough to admit it, and I think some people are like that, but they won't admit it. It's not necessarily they even believe it, although they think they do. It's just they want to go against the authority because they don't. They're upset with it, they're frustrated. They think that the leaders have run off with the movement. Now there's a group of people who are claiming that some of Prabhupada's senior servants had killed Prabhupada. So, for most of us who've read that, we find that inconceivable that anybody would say such a thing. But when you're looking to pull down leaders, you'll try to do it in any way you can. And they're very convinced, that they've convinced themselves. So, I don't think there's much you can say. I don't want to psychoanalyze anybody, but I would say they're frustrated, extremely frustrated with the leadership. So much so that they are willing to believe these things, or at least entertain that it's possibly true. Yes?
Different devotees, they get different experiences. So sometimes, they get bitter. They get something that they don't resolve with themselves, and they get bitter.
Yeah. One of the things we could look at is and we'll talk about this more on Saturday in our workshop on guilt. But from what I've noticed, a lot of these issues of criticism and inability to cooperate happen amongst individuals who are not able to fully take responsibility for their emotions. They become bitter and they don't know how to process that in a healthy way. They're not accepting of the way things are going. They find it difficult to see the good in how things are going. They become highly critical. And I'm not saying that there aren't problems, and I'm not saying that what they say is not justifiable in all situations. But how they're processing it becomes a problem, because you never want to process any experience in a way that pulls you down or discourages you or causes you to hate anybody. That is, of all lessons I've learned in life, that's probably one of the most important. If something is having a negative effect on you and you haven't been able to deal with it, to overcome it, then you need to grow. You're going to have to grow inside, grow emotionally, to be able to dissipate it in a way that you can move forward in your life without that pulling you down. And many people haven't done that. They're bitter, and they've had bad experiences 30 years ago, and they're still bitter. That's not healthy, is it? They have reasons they're bitter. I'm not arguing, I wouldn't argue the reasons that they're bitter, but the way they processed it is unhealthy. And I would tend to think if people are like that, they pretty much process most negative events in their life in the same way, by becoming bitter, critical, blaming, which are not productive ways to deal with problems, are they? You know, people say, what do you think about this? If I think about this, it just upsets my mind, so why should I think about it? So they say, what do you think about this? And I say, I don't think about it. And they go, but it's a problem. I go, I know it's a problem, which I can do nothing about, and if I think about it, it'll simply depress me, disturb me, and discourage me. So why should I think about it? I'm thinking about something that inspires me. Whatever you're for, inspires you, energizes you. Whatever you're against, drains you. So why should I meditate on something that drains me? If a leader made a mistake, why should I spend 30 years meditating on that? Because it's made me bitter, it's pushed me outside the movement, I don't want to do service, I'm still critical. That's not good for my spiritual life. We can recognize the mistakes, we can learn from the mistakes, we can move forward, we can be sympathetic and compassionate to the people who tried but failed. That's a totally different way of processing it, right? So-and-so failed. He was a guru, he failed. What's one way of processing it? Blame, criticism, bitterness. What's another way of processing it? Sympathy. He tried. He did good while he was in the position. Understanding his situation. He was a young man. He struggled. He needed to get married. I can understand. I can accept that. I appreciate what he's done. That's another way of processing it. And there's absolutely no negativity in you. Does that make sense?
What about initiation, Prabhu? Can you elaborate more on it?
In regards to?
In regards, when something like this happens.
Oh, someone falls. Oh, guru falls. That's one way of processing it. I appreciate my guru for what he did, and he went through some difficulty, but I remember all the good, and I wish him well, and I understand that, he took sannyas as a young man. He took up this responsibility. He did it for Prabhupada. Prabhupada asked him. Maybe he doubted that he could do it, but Prabhupada wanted him to. He tried. He did well while he could, and we appreciate what he did. And it's unfortunate, but I have Prabhupada's shelter, and I will move on, and maybe at some point find shelter in another guru. And that's that way. If you process it that way, your spiritual life will not be affected. If you process it in the bitter way, I was cheated, he let me down, which generally will be your initial emotions. So I'm not saying you won't feel it, but I'm saying once you feel it, now what do? How do you process it once you feel it? I said something in class tonight you didn't like, and you come up after the class and you say, you really hurt me by saying this. So my initial response might be, well, that's your problem, not mine. What I said was true. And then I'm really upset about it, and I'm upset with you, and then I process it, and I start thinking, yeah, I shouldn't have said that, you're right, and I call you up and say thank you for saying that. That's a good advice. So I've processed it in a mature way, so that it's a positive effect. Many people don't know how to process their emotions. If you're bitter day after day, year after year, you're not processing your emotion properly, and you're allowing one event to kind of dictate the way you're going to deal with so many other events in your life. That's not smart, right? So the negative side of what he's saying, his guru fell down, that means his trust in all gurus is finished. He'll never be able to take shelter of anyone because he couldn't process his hurt in a way to rebuild trust in people who are trustworthy. Does that make sense? You understand? So now that one event, not processed properly emotionally, is now the cause of him never finding shelter in any spiritual master again in Iskcon. That's unfortunate. It may be the cause of him giving up devotional service. maybe the cause of him. You know what happened when the first guru started falling down? People were losing faith in their own guru. Oh, maybe my guru's next. Maybe they're all bogus. So people were having a hard time processing. And a lot of us are not in touch with our feelings, so we don't know how to process them. And so what happens is an event happens, and then there's an emotion that comes. And sometimes that emotion from that event stays with you because you don't know you can have any other emotion than that. So that anger, that bitterness, it sticks with you. As intense as it was the day you found out your guru fell, 20 years later you still feel it the same way because you didn't know how to process it. Does that make sense? Okay.
So how to process it?
You have to come on Saturday morning to the manor.
How do we know who's the right person?
Oh, who's the right person to take shelter of?
Yes, please.
I can't say for you, but it has to be by your own experience, that your doubts are being answered, your heart is being purified and inspired by this one person, much more than anybody else, that you feel trust in him, that you can give your life to him, you feel he'll guide you, you want to serve him, you feel safe. And the frequency, Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, you have to, he didn't use the frequency word, he didn't use the word frequency, but I'll use it. You have to be on the same frequency. Because if your nature is a certain way and your guru's nature is entirely different, it may not work. It may be difficult for you to relate to him. You may doubt sometimes things he says because it's not the way you perceive the world. So that's a consideration. I mean, there are other considerations. I think Kripa Maya Prabhu has many things you can consider. Practical things like where does he live, and is he a sannyasi with a lot of disciples that I won't get to speak to? Is he a grihasta? Do I want to be grihasta? Do I want a grihasta guru? Does he have few disciples I can speak to? There's so many considerations. But I think this point about you have an experience, you have a response emotionally, and then you're feeling that response is how it's going to be for the rest of your life. That is a huge mistake. And that's due to not knowing how to process emotions. And that's due to only seeing the situation one way. So in answer to your question, hypothetically, your guru leaves, you're bitter with him, you distrust other gurus, you're bitter with Iskcon, right? Why? Because you're seeing it in a specific way, and because of how you're seeing it, you're reacting, right? If you switch to the way I was seeing it and saying, appreciate him, he did his best, so on and so forth, that's how you'll take responsibility for your feelings, because your feelings will then change into something more benevolent, like understanding, kindness, write him a letter, I appreciate whatever you've done, I understand, I wish the best for you. That's pretty much the opposite of bitterness, isn't it? So when you have an emotion which is extremely negative, what's the opposite of that emotion? If you can switch to that emotion and start processing it from that way, you'll mature emotionally. And sometimes the way to mature emotionally is just to have a different view on the situation. Because this happened to me, because one of my godbrothers left his position, and he was GBC and guru, and I was working under him, and he left, and actually two of them left, and neither of them told me. They left Iskcon. I was with them, working with them for years, and they left, and they didn't tell me. So you could imagine I was a little upset, right? A little bitter. And I felt betrayed. So the emotion that I was feeling strongly was the bitterness of being betrayed. And I didn't feel I could give that up. And the way I was able to give it up was through appreciating the sacrifice they made up to that point and empathizing with their struggle. That they did this as young men, and there was a good chance they weren't going to make it. They had, 27-year-old guru has disciples who are his same age in female disciples. That's really hard, don't you think? Extremely difficult. And they're sannyasis, 26, 27, 28. Never had a girlfriend in their life. Wow. So when he left, he said, I have to get married. I have to go through that. So initially I felt very let down. But how I processed that, so I didn't have to carry that my whole life, was through compassion and sympathy and understanding and appreciation. And then when I met him 23 years later, he said, "I'm sorry for what I did, and I know I let you down." So he was already remorseful when he did it. While I was still hating him, he was remorseful, which is kind of a paradox, because if I knew he was remorseful, I wouldn't have felt that way. But emotionally, I was immature. So I couldn't process the bitterness of distrust. And then when I shifted my vision, then I could process it. Because I wasn't seeing, oh, you let me down. You let Prabhupada down. How could you do this? You let your disciples down. You are a very bad person, and I don't like you. This is basically how I felt. No, you're a good person. You did your best. You just couldn't do it. Totally different emotional response. Then the other problem that you're dealing with emotionally is, I feel bitter. And why do I feel bitter? I feel bitter because of what he did. So who's responsible for my bitterness? In my mind, he is. But you all know I am, right? But I think he's responsible for my bitterness. That's emotional immaturity. When you think another person's behavior is responsible for how you feel. You agree? That's the problem, right? Nobody's behavior is responsible for how you feel. You are responsible for how you feel. And when you understand that, and you understand this other principle, that negativity is the worst, bitterness, negativity, anything negative, it's the worst possible emotion you can hold on to continually. And you understand, I have to do something to get out of this negativity. If you're negative about Iskcon gurus, if you're negative about Iskcon, if you're negative about management, this temple, you have to do something to process that so you can be positive. Otherwise, you're not going to help anybody. You're just going to be a pinprick in everyone's side. So I'm not saying that you overlook things that are bad, but you learn how to process it so you can be positive even in spite of the bad. That's emotional maturity. Does that make sense? Now, here's the bad news. Hold the hands of your partner, because you're not going to like to hear this. The average adult has the emotional maturity of a child between the age of 7 and 11. What do you think of that? Make sense? So, you don't have to remain that way, but you have to learn how to process your emotions so that when you feel a certain way, it's not how you act. So emotional maturity is to take responsibility for your emotions. So I'm not saying you're not going to feel bad. If I yell at you, you will feel bad most likely. But what are you going to do with that? You're going to go home and process it and finally say, Mahatma was right. I feel bad, but he was right. And I understand I was disturbing him, and I understand why he said that. So the next day we're friends again. You're fine. But if you can't process it, you're going to hate me the rest of your life. For one thing I said. And do you know people like that? Who hate you or someone for one event? And that's emotional immaturity. So, you feel what you feel. We can't necessarily control that until we're on a higher level. And as we progress, we're going to be more mature about what we feel. But whatever we feel is one thing, but how we react is another thing. How we take responsibility for that feeling is another thing. You hurt my feelings, I hate you, I never want to talk to you. That's an immature response. You hurt my feelings. Maybe there was something you said that was extremely valuable that I need to listen to. I need to think about it. Maybe there's something in me that you aroused that I need to work on. That's emotional maturity. You said something that aroused my anger. Maybe there's something going on in me that I'm not looking at. That what you said shouldn't have made me that angry, but it did. This person did this, I'm out of Iskcon, I'm bitter. A more mature way would say, why am I so bitter because of this? How can I deal with this? Because if I don't deal with it, I'm going to lose the association of devotees. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, you had another... Someone had...
No, I just want to clarify, will there be more space for questions now
Yeah, just keep asking, because I didn't really plan anything today other than to process what we did yesterday.
I see, 'cause
Although I'm quite spontaneous, so I can come up with exercises, but what we're doing Saturday morning this is like, it's kind of morphing into that, processing emotions. But you can see, in order to cooperate, you have to have emotional processing skill. Otherwise, you'll just walk out and yell and scream and not want to be part of the group. So that's why I made this more of an internal seminar. And if you were all managers, I would have given a completely different seminar. So your questions are fine. Keep asking.
Because I have a bunch of practical questions.
Well, does anyone else have any questions before, or would anyone else like to share their realizations before he takes up the... Anyway.
I just wanted to add about what you said with
Sure.
regards to positive and negative emotions.
Yes.
As you come across negative emotions from whatever individual situations,
Mm-hmm.
you say you turn that into a positive by taking positive action
Positive action, or seeing the situation
from their perspective.
from their perspective, or a more Krishna conscious perspective, or like, what can I learn perspective, or also just from dealing with the reality that if I remain holding on to this emotion and I just do the forecast of what's going to happen in that emotional state, it's bad. So some self-development teacher said the most important thing you can learn to be successful is to manage your emotions, because they're guiding your actions so much, and if you can't manage them, you're going to do things that are going to work against you. But one of the things that I've found is that the easiest way to manage them is just to see things differently, because we're responding to the story, right? In my example, the story was he let us down and his disciples down and Prabhupada down. So that makes me mad. Change the story. He was a good devotee. He tried his best. We understand that he was honest. He actually stepped down before he got married. So he said, I need to leave and get married. He said, and I want to step down before I fall down. So he was honest. So that was his new story. He was honest. He was sincere. He was intelligent about what he did. But with the new story, then I don't feel hurt anymore. So that's the easiest way, in my experience, to alter emotions, is to alter stories.
You also mentioned about the 7 to 11-year-old mentality
Yeah,
in terms of emotional growth.
yeah.
Isn't it just human nature, or at least adult nature, to react before
Yeah.
applying thought
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
processing
Yeah,
ideas?
it is.
It's just a...
But there's a way, there is a way around it. But see, no, not necessarily react. I would say it's human nature to feel, but not react. Okay, so you come in and I say, why are you late? Don't you respect me? So immediately you feel disrespected. But your response could be, I'm really sorry, but my bus had a flat tire, like that. Or something, or I'm really sorry, I wasn't planning to come and someone just said. So you respond in a polite way, even though you're feeling a little bit offended. So that's how you can manage your emotions that way. So you're taking this, like, who's Mahatma to say that he doesn't even know me? And you just decide, well, I'll act politely. So one of the things that we should be thinking as devotees is, how is a devotee meant to behave? Despite how I feel, how am I meant to behave? Because I don't have to act on my feelings. I can connect with something more than how I feel. All right, I feel like whatever. But how does Prabhupada want me to act? And I think we talked about addressed that a little bit yesterday. You're in a group, how do you feel, but how you should act. I feel this group is dysfunctional, but I want to participate on a functional level, so I'm going to act in this way even though I feel like this. You can do that. Like, we can actually do that. And I think the key here is many of us don't have a lot of experience of doing that, so we don't think we can do that. When we're mad, we're mad. When we're angry, we yell. When we're upset, we cry. Or we get depressed. Or we lock ourselves in a room. You don't have to do that. Right? That's what emotional maturity is, that you can, okay, this is how I feel, but how am I going to act? There's a difference. In immature emotions, this is how I feel and this is how I act. There's nothing to diffuse that. And for us as devotees, the impetus is, this is how I feel, but I have a standard of actions, and that's what Prabhupada wants me to do. But the good news is, you can elevate your consciousness so your feelings in these environments become more Krishna conscious. Yes?
From yesterday's practical example,
Yes.
it's good to understand that personally I come from suppressing feelings.
Yes.
So a lot of how we act is not, how to act because we've suppressed it so much. And hearing from other devotees saying that when we're chanting, we're actually bringing up all this,
Yeah.
these feelings and
Yes.
what to do with them because we've suppressed them.
Oh, you don't know what to do with them because you're not, yeah. You can learn how to deal with them, and the first way to deal with them is to face them. Because we're afraid to face them, the solution is to face them. Because, well, that's what we're going to talk about on Saturday. There is a lot of stuff in there that we're not aware of. And the problem is, because we're not aware of it doesn't mean it's not having its effect. And I think some of us are afraid of emotions because we have emotions which we feel are not Krishna conscious, or we're just afraid because that's how we grew up, or that's the samskars we have. And then we don't know how to process them. And then we go into denial. Why are you so upset? I'm not upset. To me, you look really upset. No, I'm not upset at all. Why do you say that? You don't even know you're upset. And I can see you're upset because you've suppressed it. And now you're creating a problem for me, and you have no idea why I have a problem with you because you're not upset. Right? So, there's possibly a problem that in some devotional communities it's difficult to be honest about emotions because we fear we'll be judged because the emotions I'm expressing are 19th chapter emotions. They're not in the first 18. And if I express 19th chapter emotions, I will be judged, criticized, condemned, kicked out of the temple, blasphemed on the internet, whatever, We could imagine so many things. So it's better we suppress them and even pretend to ourselves they're not there, so I can feel good about myself and I can pretend to others that I'm good and I won't have any trouble. So that's why I feel in devotional communities we have to have an environment where we can be open. Do you know what happens when you talk about your problems? You diffuse your problems by talking about them. That's a scientific reality or a psychological reality. Problems get diffused, the negative energy just gets sucked away, dispersed by speaking about them. So if we have an environment where we feel we can't speak, then it's counterproductive to healing. So, and if you're really going to speak about it, you're going to feel it, right? That's part of the healing, feeling it. So, at least if you're aware of it, you can start working on it. And don't be afraid to feel. You don't have to act on what you're feeling. That's the emotional maturity. You feel it, but you don't act on it. And if you feel something, just like if I say something that makes you angry, and you allow yourself to feel it, you might think, why did that make me angry? And so you're not angry at me, you're just feeling the anger, but not feeling angry at me, just the emotion anger, and asking, why am I angry? And you'll probably realize, he said something that struck something about myself that I've been hiding from, and it made me angry. But if you suppress it, how will you understand what got you angry? Because you don't even admit you're angry. And it'll keep happening. And so part of emotional maturity is to suppress emotions because you can't deal with them. But emotions carry wisdom, and if you allow yourself to experience them, then they guide you. Right? I think they carry so much wisdom because emotions beg, if they're negative, they beg the question, why am I feeling like this right now? What's wrong with me? Why do I hate this person? Because he just drove up to the temple in a really nice car and I don't have a nice car, and therefore I hate him. And to be able to confront that reality because it's so stupid, it's so not Krishna conscious, to be able to confront it is valuable. And to just not just hate him and not confront the reality of it doesn't do you any good. It just prolongs the problem. And you hide behind it. No, I don't hate him. I don't hate anybody. You do hate him. Because he's more successful than you, and you don't like that. Because you don't like yourself. And because you don't like yourself, you don't like people who are doing better than you. That's the reality. You have to be able to admit that. And then you can start working on the fact that you don't like yourself. Isn't it? So that's the problem when we hide from emotions, because the emotions, they're telling us something. They just come in, the information comes in feelings, it doesn't come in thoughts. That's all. Isn't it? Information and feelings. Some come in thoughts, some come in feelings. I don't feel good about this place. What is it? I don't know. Let's get out of here. Ratnavati and I, they're good friends of Bimal and Sanj, are good friends of Ratnavati. And so Ratnavati, some of you may know, well, we were in South Africa in 1982, and we were distributing books and raising money for the Mauritius Temple. And we went to the capital of South Africa, and this is during apartheid. So I'm, very enthusiastic, very bold, fearless. Pretoria is the head of the government, and the government is Afrikaans, and Afrikaans are like extremely conservative, Dutch, white, and they're responsible for apartheid. So we're outside a mall, and Ratnavati, after about 3 minutes, says, I don't think we should stay here. I have a bad feeling about it. And so there's no, I need evidence. I need evidence. It's a woman's feeling. I want some evidence here. I'm like, I'm a man. I'm not going to just walk off. This is the Sankirtan movement. We have to distribute Prabhupada's books. This is the heart of the government of South Africa. I'm not going to walk away. We got arrested. Like 3 minutes after she said that, we got arrested. So she couldn't give any evidence. It was just, that's what she felt. So sometimes feelings have information in them, but it's not coming through here. So you can't say, well, what's the basis? I don't know. I just feel like I feel like this. We got to get out of here. This is the wrong place to be. Isn't that interesting? Well, you want to hear the rest of the story? It's so interesting. So we had to go to court for it. So there we are, in another country. We're not, just visiting on tourist visas, doing Sankirtan. And we go to court, and they call us up and say, for this crime, the punishment is 2 years in jail. And I'm like, oh my God. It's like total shock. We're sitting there. He goes, then he waits for a while, and he says, but as long as you don't commit the violation again, we'll let you go. But for that first minute, we thought we were going to be in jail for 2 years. I don't know if she remembers, but you can ask her. But I remember distinctly, he said 2 years in jail for this crime. But anyway, men who are married know that sometimes women have intuition that doesn't make sense to a man. And they just know this is going to happen. So emotions, they give information. Right? So sometimes you do something and you feel bad about it, right? Does anyone like feeling bad? No. So you suppress it. You pretend that it actually isn't bad. It's nothing. So if you feel bad about doing something and you're going to continue doing it, the only way to process it is turn off the emotion so that you don't feel bad, right? Now, If you feel bad about doing something and you allow yourself to feel it, what's going to happen? Probably you're going to stop doing it. Because the emotion is telling you what you're doing is bad and you should stop. So emotions carry information. But if you don't allow yourself to experience them, you don't get the information. Does that make sense? So that's the problem with suppressing. And now, when you become a devotee, then sometimes you think, I shouldn't feel, because if I feel, I'm a sahajya. Or I'm a sentimentalist. I have to be philosophical and so on. Which may be true in some situations, but in other situations, it's unhealthy not to feel. In the early days, we'd have children, and we're detached, So you give your 1-year-old, you go on Sankirtan and your 1-year-old is in the nursery for 10 hours with some other woman. And the kid becomes alienated and you're so aloof that your motherly affection, you've suppressed it in the name of Sankirtan. So we experienced all these things. And people would say, you're a cult, and we'd say, no, we're not. And then 20 years later, said, oh my God, we were such a cult. Because we cut off our emotions. So if you ever feel bad about something, ask yourself, why do I feel bad? Does that mean I've done something bad? Maybe I shouldn't feel bad. Maybe I'm just processed it wrong. It could mean anything. Maybe there's something wrong with me that I feel bad about something that was good. Maybe that's what my emotion is telling me. I have low self-esteem. I always feel bad, even when I do good. And there was no reason to feel bad, but I do. You just go with it and you'll get something. Is that all right? Is that more than all right? Yeah, so at least it's good to know that emotionally we have room to grow, and it doesn't mean we don't feel. But as you advance in Krishna consciousness, what you feel is going to go higher. So when you yell at me and I'm up here, I'll say, thank you. I appreciate that you're giving me that advice. I needed to hear that. You'll feel that way when you're Krishna conscious. Don't try to imitate that. If you don't feel that way, you can't imitate it. But at least you should know that I should feel that way. And you can, and because you don't feel that way, it's like, okay, a little check-in here. Somebody said something that I can improve, and I didn't like it. Check in on the humility level. It's not looking good here. The arrogance level is like it's rising. I should have said thank you. I said, well, I'll consider that. I appreciate you took the time to point that out. But I didn't. I reacted. I felt intimidated, and like, who are you? And I'm looking for a fault in you. So that I should be aware. Okay, this is check-in time. I didn't process that well. That means I'm still dealing with a lot of ego. Or maybe 20 years from now that happens and I say thank you. And I go, hey, that's good. Pat on the back. I didn't get upset. I'm advancing. So your emotional response will change also. Initial response will get elevated as you get elevated. Now, here's the bad news, everyone. You can be spiritually advanced and emotionally immature. You probably didn't want to hear that, did you? It's possible. You can get up, chant your rounds, be merged in the Sankirtan movement, and get in an argument and run off like a 7-year-old kid and slam the door. That can happen. And it does happen. So don't just think because you're chanting Hare Krishna that everything else will go well. These are things we have to monitor. And wouldn't you agree that a group of emotionally mature people will make a better team than a group of emotionally immature people? I think that's obvious. Yes, Sanj has a question. Yes, Orkan.
Yeah, it's because I have a close friend of mine.
Yes.
So he's been going through a lot of problems at home with his wife.
Yes.
And it's quite a deep rooted problem. It's been going on for quite some time. And it's obviously affecting his performance at work.
Yes.
And he's talking to me about it, and he's mentioned that his boss has pulled him up a few times and had a meeting with him due to his performance, and
Yeah.
deeply focused
Yeah.
on his personal problem. So, how does cooperation play within that kind of environment, with his kind of business kind of work environment,
Well,
with him and his boss, and how open should he be, and etc.
oh, to cooperate with his boss, and
Yeah, and
It's-
kind of so his boss maybe kind of understands what he's going through.
Yeah.
In kind of relation to the whole cooperation kind of topic.
well, he's a little bit handicapped in that environment. He ideally, he would understand the concerns of his boss and admit that his performance is slackening because of the situation. But for him personally, it sounds like until he can handle that situation well, his performance is going to suffer. He may be handicapped. In fact, I once came up with a brilliant idea to go into companies and offer marriage workshops for this very reason. Because if the life suffers at home, it's going to suffer in the office. In an ideal company, he would get counseling how to deal with it. Or if it's available. Or on his own. On his own he might say, okay, my boss is concerned, I see I'm in a mess. I need counseling, otherwise I'm not going to function well in the company. And you want to hear something interesting? That in the Bhagavatam, it describes the mentality of a Shudra. And the mentality of a Shudra is service-oriented. So the Shudra is dedicated, the Shudra is dedicated to their master. That's one of the qualities of Shudra. The Shudras have many good qualities. And dedication is one of them. So, one thing I would tell him is that you're employed, and therefore it's your duty to perform optimally because you're being paid. That's the good quality of an employee. That's your integrity. And so, if this situation at home is a disturbance, you should do something. Get some help. That's at least one solution. Now, of course, the boss should understand, but still, even if the boss understands, he's got someone that's not performing the way he should, so he's got to deal with that practically. Now, I don't know the situation, because it may be his fault. The problem at home could be his fault. And if it is, it would be good for him to learn and deal with. It's also, I think, an aspect of emotional maturity is to be able to go to work and turn off those problems. To be able to focus on what you have to do in spite of those problems. You want to hear an interesting story? Prabhu? That's actually, everyone's looking at you, giving out water. So it's better you don't. You want to take a break and everyone get some water? Should we do that? Yeah. Why don't we take like 5-10 minute break? You can get some water, go to the bathroom, and then I'll tell you the story. Is that okay? Because we should take a break. Yeah. Because we've been here, wow, almost been here 2 hours, yeah. So let's take a little break, stretch, air, water, and whatever else you need. And then I'll tell you the story. Yes. And all of you, I don't know what you want to do for 10 minutes, but we'll come back in 10 minutes or 15 minutes or something. Because you'll just get bored looking at me. Okay.